What is up, everybody? I'm here to talk to you about specificity and dynamic correspondence. All right, specificity, kind of a buzzword, can be used in a lot of coaching contexts. We're going to go over what that means. Dynamic correspondence is basically how our training gets brought over into our sport. That term was coined by Rick If you don't know who that is, do some more reading if you're a coach. But if you don't need to know who that is, don't worry about it. Basically, just a way to guarantee that we are going to see transfer from the gym to sport. Okay, so first with specificity, we want to go over the SAID principle. The SAID principle is the specific adaptation to impose demands principle. And that just means that we are going to get specific adaptations to the demands that we put in the body, the inputs that we put into the body. Okay, so if you're following that, that means that if we want to get faster, we have to put specific inputs in to get faster. If we want to get stronger, we have to put specific inputs in to get stronger, okay? And hopefully what we're doing in the gym is going to transfer. That's the main idea there. What every coach is looking for is transfer to sport. That is what every coach is looking for. No matter what mode or medium they're using or what they believe, every single coach should be, I would bet, 99% have to be, are looking for transfer to sport. But what does this mean? And that is where the differences come. That is where we get lost. What this means is we are looking for, in my humble opinion, we are looking for force production and the ability to utilize that force, okay? And that's where we kind of get the separation of how we can get specificity. Force production, or increasing that force production, increasing that floor for force production and the ceiling, mostly comes from the gym and field work. So cuts, jumps, whatever, or just increasing your strength, impulse, force, all these things. Okay, moving on. What specificity is not, this is probably the most important part of the video. I'm gonna trim all the fat of what people think specificity is, but are just totally misguided and totally wrong. Specificity is not specific to the action, to the kinematics, okay? Now, joint angles, how you're applying force in these joint angles, that does matter. And that requires different nuance in different situations for different athletes in different sports. But what I mean by that, it is not specific to the sporting skill action, okay? And that kind of ties in to specificity is not more sport practice. So it's very common to see on Instagram, especially with soccer. I'm a soccer player, I was a soccer player, so let's go with that. Very common to see someone doing lateral shuffles over a hurdle, soccer ball, they kick it, punt it back, or kick it back, and that's their agility practice. And that is just not what specificity is in the weight room. That is not a bad warm-up drill for a soccer practice, but if we really want to improve agility and force production and all these different capabilities of the athlete and not work on skill when we're in the gym, we want to work on things we're supposed to be doing in the gym, not sport practice, that is just pointless. So we are adding too many layers for it to be specific to our tissue, which is what we'll go over next. But specificity is not action specific. We do not want to confuse specificity of tissue, which is in the next section, with specificity of kinematics. And that's super important. So we don't want to get caught up in doing the same motions we see in sport and just bringing that into the weight room. That is not what we want. That is a waste of our time. We already get that in the sport. Don't bring that into the weight room. That does not mean we don't want to utilize, if say a tennis player, they have to do a lot of lateral cutting and movement. We do want to include lateral movement in the gym, in our plyos, in our agility. But that doesn't mean we have to add a tennis ball or a racket or a swinging motion. Okay, next. And it is not sport practice, went over that with the ball. We just do not need to mix our sport practice with our strength work. It just creates too many layers and it is too complicated and we are not getting either of those adaptations because we're just in this weird middle gray ground. What specificity is tissue specific. So when we're in the gym, we want to hit specific tissues and specific joint angles that we do see in the sport. So we do want to work on our muscles capabilities. We do want to work on our tendon capabilities, that tendon elasticity. We want to become more robust. We want all these primary, secondary, tertiary effects that we get from training these tissues. So that's super important. It is also energy system specific. So we do have to train the specific energy systems that we see in sport, in that specific sport. Soccer player is going to be much different than a tennis player. A football player is going to be much different than a cross-country runner. So all these things matter. And the force profile is also what specificity is. We need to train the specific force profiles that we are seeing. And we want to raise the force profile and improve the athlete's ability to have a higher impulse so that they can change their velocity, so that they can move their body or move an outside implement more efficiently. Okay, so specificity is not specific to the sporting action, but it can be joint specific. It is not more sport practice, but it is tissue specific. So we want to improve the specificity of what's going on in the sport in the weight room. So whatever is happening in the muscle in the sport. So if that's high velocity movement in a short duration, we want to work on that. But if the athlete, if they're not doing that, they're doing something else, we have to work on that at the tissue level, the cellular level, not at the movement level. And then it's energy system specific. We need to be fit in a specific way for that sport. And it is force profile specific. So we have to be able to produce force in a specific manner for that sport. But that doesn't mean we have to play that sport in the gym. All right, last little bit here. This is kind of where it all ties together for field work and sport work. Now this is hard to implement in the weight room context, but in sport it is super important so that we can be as specific as possible for that sport. So, ecological dynamics. If you don't know what that is, read any of Rob Gray's work. There's a ton of papers on it. DM me, message me, and I'll send them to you or put you in the right direction. So, in our environment, in our ecology, we have the task, the environment, and the organism, and they create this intertwining environment where they interact constantly. They are not separated. So, we don't just have the environment, the outside environment, we don't just have the organism, we don't just have the task. They are constantly coupling and moving in with each other to create the certain situations. Every situation is different. Every single one in sport is different. And this moves into perception and action coupling. So many of us perceive perception and action as two separate things. We perceive the environment and then we act. But when we act, the environment changes, then we perceive it differently. So these two are actually coupled. We have an information, movement, coupling. So as you move, the information changes. As the perception and your information changes, you move differently. So that's very important. And this just helps us, this whole thing helps us tie into physical performance. That's the end goal. And in the context of specificity, we can use this in creating specific environments, and this is more for sport training, specific environments that help the athlete become more attuned to their specific sporting environment. So we don't just want to do these drills that are just passing in a line, trying to teach technique. We want to immerse them in an environment that is going to teach them the skill and improve their physical performance. That's a little bit of a tangent, but I just kind of wanted to go over it a little bit. So, all in all, specificity and dynamic correspondence. Increase your force output. That is just going to make you a better athlete. Increase your impulse, which is just force over time, basically. That is going to make you a better athlete. Increase ability to display this force in an in-game context. That's where that comes in. We have to be able to use this force in an ever-changing environment. Last point, specificity in the gym means increasing the capability of the athlete. And how do we increase capability? We get in there, we hit some weights, we hit some jumps specific to that athlete's needs. This is not just a cookie cutter thing, it changes for every athlete. But we have to get in there and increase the capability of the athlete. Increase force production, increase their ability to be an athlete and problem solve, and you're on your right track. See you guys later.